The views and opinions expressed are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of KTOO Public Media. This program may contain discussions that include terminology or perspectives that reflect different time periods, cultural contexts, or viewpoints that may not align with contemporary standards or expectations.
We wanted to teach them a lot about radio because most kids don't know very much about radio at all, and they certainly don't know that there's anything exciting on the radio besides music.
No, I thought I'd be somebody, famous and talented and capable and making big money, looked up to by society. And instead, I ended up as a disc jockey. Right, okay, got it.
As a community radio station, I believe that it has two functions. One is a voice for the community, allowing community members to come on the air either as volunteer DJs or as guests. The other part is to inform and help the community in a way that commercial radio can't.
Greetings and welcome again to Rain Country, the weekly television journal of the people, of places, and the activities that make up life in Rain Country. I'm Scott Foster. The wireless radio was first demonstrated in 1894. Since that time, despite the increased popularity of other forms of entertainment, radio still continues to hold its appeal. We take radio with us wherever we go and listen to it all the time, like while we're driving. There's an estimated 500 million radios in the United States. And if you took all those radios and put them over the level land of America, including Alaska, there'd be one radio in every 5 acres. Now, what comes out of those radios depends on the broadcasting station. In Juneau, one of the longest-running voices belongs to the Morning Man on KINY. Uncle Fatz is a personality announcer who minimizes music and maximizes good talk, good sense of humor, and general observations every morning between 6 and 9.
Isn't that a marvelous piece of info? A circus that tours the country is called a traveling circus. That's right out of somebody's second grade paper here this morning. 10 minutes after 7, 10 past 7.
Someone just called, and in fact, someone called earlier about Dolly Varden fishing. It's closed now within the, how you say, contiguous Juneau area, and it'll be open again later, but it is closed now. Good morning, KINY. Yes. Blue eggs? Blue eggs, did you say? Right, okay, got it. Fill them up with glass and jelly beans? Well, most of the silliness is just whatever pops in my head, and a lot of it just comes from people that call. Most of the really creative stuff I just get from somebody who picks up the phone and calls me. A lot of this stuff you couldn't think up yourself. Oh, I get people that are just, what was that movie about the guy who was, I've had it right up to here, and I'm going to throw open a window and shout at everybody? I get people like that, and then I have had severely upset people who are threatening dire consequences to themselves a couple of times.
What do you do in a case like that?
Just sit there and talk to them, just kind of let everything else ride, and try to talk to them a little bit. And I have had threats, and I have had people that are obviously totally off, they're on another planet. You also get to talk to some awfully nice people. Well, it's generally a lot of fun, and that's why I said it's the next best thing to stealing. All you do is sit there and enjoy yourself and wake up in the morning and drink coffee, the same thing I'd be doing if I was sitting home, only I get paid for it.
So when you were young, did you think you'd be a disc jockey when you grew up?
No. No, I thought I'd be somebody, famous and talented and capable and making big money, looked up to by society. And instead, I ended up as a disc jockey.
So how'd this happen?
By just sheer economic forces. When you're starving to death, you'll do almost anything to make a buck. And I was too dumb to steal.
So
and the next best thing to stealing is being in the radio business.
Well, how did you develop your style?
I didn't try to develop anything. It's just a little morning silliness, you know. People are getting up. Generally, they don't want anything heavy piled on their heads because I think most people are, like the rest of us, struggling along, fighting off the government or fighting off something, trying to earn a living. So all I do is sit there and drink coffee and play a few records and try to come up with something interesting for people to either talk about or think about.
Uncle Fatz, known to some as Warren Wiley, was born in a small town in southern Minnesota. He came to Juneau in 1958 and has had a variety of careers, selling shoes and life insurance, being in the bank business and working for newspapers, pinch hitting for wire services, as well as his jobs in TV and radio. When he's not DJing, he operates a small custom rod building and tackle shop out of his home and spends as much time as he can fishing.
Now remember, anybody can get in on this thing. All you have to do is buy a buffalo chip for $5. The $5 goes to the Cancer Crusade. And so does all the money that Buffalo Bill Ray is going to lose this afternoon. But if you want to throw a chip, be careful. There's an exhaust fan on the side of the Federal or the Capitol building now where you don't want to slip and throw that thing in the wrong direction so the chip hits the fan. But you can come up and buy one and throw it right along with the rest of us. No, that doesn't do anything.
Can you identify the zenith of popular music? During what era did popular music reach its height? I can offer you a simple formula for pinpointing the time. First, during what year did you turn 18? 1937, 1951, 1970? And then, when did you turn 23? 1942, 1956, 1975? The zenith of popular music came during this period, between the time you were 18 and the time you were 23. Music prior to that era was mostly boring, and music since that time has, let's face it, dribbled downhill. Listen sometime to a group of 60s kids. Now approaching 40, the erstwhile courageous rebels against the fogey music of yesteryear discuss, in the same slightly lugubrious, slightly smug tone once used by defenders of Sinatra, how nobody has produced anything innovative, or even particularly agreeable, since Let It Be signaled the end of an era. They are not being narrow and closed, as their parents were. They have tried to listen, and let's face it, world civilization and music reached a peak at Woodstock and has since then drifted into an undistinguished decline. Why does so much of our world view remain fixed as it crystallized when we were 20? Perhaps somewhere around that time we first saw the adult world as adults, suddenly enfranchised, suddenly making real decisions of our own. We felt part of the powerful, the smart, the grown-ups. At the times in our lives when we have just emerged like that, things we do and see and feel have a clarity and an indelibility for us. I turned 18 in 1963, and I turned 23 in 1968, and if Peter, Paul, and Mary don't represent the essence of musical truth, then I'm not Nancy Spector. I'm Nancy Spector, and we're listening to Peter, Paul, and Mary.
How many roads must a man walk down before they call him a man? How many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the
There are more than 40 commercial radio stations in the state of Alaska, and there are 17 public radio stations. In Southeast, there are public stations in Haines, Sitka, Juneau, Wrangell, Petersburg, and Ketchikan. Each of these public stations offer specialized services to their local listeners, but they all have similarities. Next, an overview of a public radio station featuring KRBD in Ketchikan.
We've been listening to the Dynatones, Tough to Shake, and we heard a tune.
KRBD-FM first hit Ketchikan's airwaves in May of 1976, broadcasting from high atop the Marine View Apartments.
We had 7 volunteers and 7 days of the week to fill, and we started, first thing we did on the air was play a few records and talk about volunteers are welcome. Please come down and take training.
Tom Miller, KRBD's first volunteer on the air.
You know, our idea in the beginning, and I think most community radio, the whole idea is to bring the public in and have the human voice, you know, the real voice of the people. They come in, they do only a little bit every week maybe on the air, but they never get jaded, and they're never trying to sell something or be real hot jocks or whatever. And that's charming to me, and I think it's just authentic, and you get more kinds of voices. It's a democratic kind of idealistic thing, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. A lot of work too, but yeah.
Public or non-commercial radio was established to provide an alternative to commercial radio, which must serve a larger audience to survive financially. Community stations were formed much through the effort of dedicated unpaid volunteers. Funded originally by its listeners, public radio in Alaska now has the additional support of federal and state dollars.
As a community radio station, I believe that it has 2 functions. One is a voice for the community, allowing community members to come on the air either as volunteer DJs or as guests or to bring their message or entertainment to the community. The other part is to inform and help the community in a way that commercial radio can't, devoting large periods of time to issues that are relevant to the community, being able to, for example, during elections, spend half hour with each of the candidates and talk to them. So I see it as both a forum where people can come in and then also for us to do information, both with local programming and bringing in national news, such as National Public Radio.
Besides the approximately 14,000 people of Ketchikan, KRBD also serves an additional 5,000 in communities on Prince of Wales Island, such as Cake, Klawock, and Heidelberg, and many other remote logging camps, using translator sites powered by diesel. Chuck Lakatos is the engineer responsible for maintaining these and the rest of KRBD's gear.
When you figure that helicopters are $450 an hour, we're running around a $15,000 bill keeping our translator system going, which accounts for a considerable portion of the listening audience. That and the fact that for some reason, whenever you call up equipment suppliers, they think Ketchikan is not, in fact, 635 miles from Seattle, where they always assume that it's somewhere north of Barrow for some reason.
People in a community like Ketchikan have the ability to change what their government does. And so I think our job, the job of reporters, both at the public radio station, any radio or television station, and the newspaper here, is to keep people informed mainly about what their government is doing, so that they can take that information, and then if they don't like what's going on, they can go down to the local meetings and say, hey, we don't like this.
KRBD is just a real focal point of local news, especially. We used to have the local news on both the television and another commercial radio station. However, those newscasts are not available any longer, and so really at this time the news that you hear on KRBD is pretty much it locally. And so it continues to be an important focus of community attention and interest. And so KRBD is very highly listened to, and it's a real center of community interest.
Part of our function, too, is to keep people aware of the things there are to do in this community. Because despite we have a community calendar list, for example, which has got, right now it's got 20, 25 things that are going on just this week in Ketchikan, and yet there are people that you can probably talk to who will say, hey, there's nothing to do in Ketchikan. What am I going to do, you know? So part of our job is also to let other people know what their neighbors are doing. And they are, and we are all neighbors here. That's kind of interesting.
And we're back at Talk of the Town with Carol Schaefer and Trish Hoover. We've been talking about the Southeast Symphony Association and the Southeast Symphony League and the Festival of the North concerts, and I say that plural.
Talk of the Town is KRBD's daily public affairs program, featuring local, regional, and national points of interest, hosted by one of the 3 full-time reporter-producers.
I've heard Sitka described as a major postcard, and I've heard Ketchikan described as a place of intense, diverse energy. And I think that diversity and energy is seen in the eclectic group of volunteers that we have working here at KRBD. One example is the fact that one of our local morticians is an absolute scholar on the subject of 1950s style music, and his nickname is the Teen Angel. He's known as the Teen Angel on the air, but in his professional life he is a mortician.
You know, we've been rather negligent in our geographical names this morning, so I did want to give you a couple of names to help you along in your coffee cup conversations this morning. One is Beam Canal. That's the body of water that goes all the way around our island of Revillagigedo.
Don Bullock, former pastor and ex-commercial broadcaster, now has a regular morning show.
Somebody said, well, it's the first city in Southeast where everybody gets off. So you have quite a diversity of people and ideas and culture and what all. I've always felt that there was a need for what I call easy listening music and some personal talk, and it was just an opportunity to sort of share with the community a couple of hours a day, and I hope they enjoy it. I enjoy it.
I think we get more rain and people stay indoors a lot more and enjoy the music more, enjoy the programs. They're more in tune to what information they get without going outside. And especially in the wintertime, dark days, rainy, who wants to go out, so you listen to radio.
Now operating out of facilities overlooking Ketchikan Creek, KRBD FM continues as public broadcasting for Ketchikan, Alaska.
Good afternoon. You're listening to All Day Music Part 2. My name is Joan, and this show is going to go on until about 5 o'clock this afternoon, and I had a little idea for today. I thought that we'd focus on Beatles and early rock influences of the British genre, mainly because I'm reading another Beatles book. It's my 4th. I'm on a Beatles kick.
remember those Stan Freberg commercials where he would say that radio can do anything, especially things that other media can't do? You know, like draining Lake Erie, like filling it with whipped cream, and then putting a maraschino cherry on the top that was dropped from a B-52. Well, he proved it could be done through his voice, through sound effects, and through the listener's imagination to fill in the gaps. It's the use of that imagination that teachers from Juneau's Perseverance Theater capitalize on when they conduct children radio theater workshops.
I knew you would like that one. And now for my last joke. You were the one about the bed? No. No wonder it hasn't been made yet. Don't worry, I'll think of something. Bye, I've had a great time.
Something guys, stand up comic. We'll have another act soon. But first, this talent show wouldn't be possible without the help of many organizations and businesses around the town. Okay.
Joan and I are here at the invitation of Perseverance Theater and KTOO to produce radio plays with kids. And we've had a month-long workshop for the whole month of June where we've taught them about the art of making radio drama, from writing plays for the radio to acting to the creation of sound effects. And we've done a lot of improvisation work, and we are going to be producing 2 plays written by kids.
Doris Indike and Joan Belsey, founders of Children's Radio Theater, brought some magic to Juneau this summer. Working through the Summer Theater Arts Rendezvous program sponsored by the Juneau Arts and Humanities Council, Perseverance Theater, and KTOO-FM, these 2 women ran a workshop for kids called Creating Radio Plays.
Joan Belsey and I founded Children's Radio Theater, that's the name of the organization, 8 years ago. And we decided on radio for a lot of reasons. One, because it's very captivating to the imagination. Another, because it's inexpensive to produce and you don't have to be very literal in producing it. You can create epic plays without having to literally and visually show every single moment.
Okay? No, she's doing good. You're on the right track. You're on the right track.
Oh, let me out.
We start off with improvisations, and we talked a lot about sounds. What sounds do they hear? What sounds do they hear when they're walking in the streets? What sound do they hear at home? And to try to get them tuned into the oral medium. The way we would run the classes is we would begin with the kids in a circle, and usually the first thing we would ask them is, what sounds did you hear? What new sounds did you hear? So they would say things like, my dishwasher, my garbage disposal, I heard the sound of a car going down the street, I heard my next door neighbor's dog, you know, like that. Then we would do a lot of improvisations, things like we'd have them move in space and then freeze, and then however they froze, we would have them create a new character from the physical body position that they were in. And then we would go around with a microphone and we would ask, who are you now? Where do you live? How old are you? To try and get them to think in terms of becoming new characters. We'd have them do a lot of physical exercises, like they'd come into a room and they had to show us without any words what character they were. And then we would add words, all kinds of improvisations like that. We wanted to teach them a lot about radio, because most kids don't know very much about radio at all, and they certainly don't know that there's anything exciting on the radio besides music. The idea that there'd be plays on the radio for them, I think, was really foreign. It's a new thing, certainly, for kids to be actively involved in the process of making radio plays. With the younger kids who are 7 to 10 years old, we are doing a play called Ink, Ink, Ink by Jennifer Way, who's 10 years old. And the play is about Fred Ink gets elected president, and he gets barraged by reporters' questions. They're always asking him very personal questions. And he gets so fed up that he and his horse Slick go to New York City, where they live in the alley like bums. And then finally, Fred Ink realizes that he has to face up to his responsibilities, and so he's going to go back to Washington and resume his responsibilities as the President of the United States.
Ink, Ink, Ink was written by Jennifer Way and performed by Paige Dunker, Sarah Harper, Schuyler Winning, Christopher Haney, Jake Sobel.
Make sure you place it on
angle and I'll take care of this mic.
In the older kids class, and those kids are 11 to 14 years old, we're doing a play called The Life and Times of Lola May, the Harried Robo-Worker. And it's about a family who buys this robot who will do all their housework for them. And she is not, it's not a perfected robot, let's put it that way.
Let's do the last scene, just Mom, Dad, I was wondering, you know.
Dad, Christmas is coming up, and I was wondering.
No, Vicky! Music, go. Into your pole positions, into the line right away. Pole position. That's right, Heidi. That's good. So when Mary and Christine are done, they can move in. You guys in the sound effects, stay.
We've got 3 of our workshop students working on live sound effects. And this is very exciting, although it's also very scary, because we'll be doing the plays live in front of a live audience, like an old-time radio show.
Agree that getting a robo-worker is a good idea. Vicki, would you mind sharing your birthday with the whole family?
I think for a lot of kids, they think theater is very glamorous, which it is. I mean, it is. But they don't understand the amount of going over and going over and going over the sections that they need to do. And they get bored, and kids have a lot of energy, and they don't always know what to do with that energy. And plus, they're in a radio station, all the stuff's around, the equipment, it's all very neat.
Once upon a time in Washington, a man named King thought he would run for the president of the USA. He got the votes, he was so proud, he moved right into the big White House with his horse slipped, but soon he found to his dismay his job was hard and did not take, so he packed his bags and ran away. Where will he go? What will he do? Our play will tell it all to you. It's about Freddie. You're listening to WXIZ in Milford. Howdy, people. That was Phil Collins with the studio.
Hello? Oh, hi, Susie. How's my big sister doing these days?
This is a
There. It's out of the box.
I think that partly these kids are learning a little bit more than they knew before about what it takes to put together a play. To work with all kids, kids doing the music, kids doing the sound effects, kids doing the acting, it's a challenge.
This is your host, Hiram Henry. Thank you for joining us live on the radio.
Thanks for joining us again for another look at the people like Juneau radio personality Uncle Fatz, the places like public radio station KRBD in Ketchikan, and the activities like the Children Radio Theater Workshop that make up life in Rain Country. Like other broadcasters, those of us associated with Rain Country like to hear from our viewers about suggestions for other story ideas, criticisms, or any kind of comments. We'll show you a place to write your comments during the credits to this show. And we'll be back again next week for another installment of Rain Country. Hopefully you'll join us then. I'm Scott Foster. Have a good day.